We're thrilled to have all of you with us this evening. As you can see from the seal on our stage, Baylor's motto is Pro Ecclesia, Pro Texana, for the church and for Texas. While our commitment to the church has not and will not change, the demands of a globalized 21st century require us to think about our commitment to Texas as a metaphor for a commitment to the world beyond our borders. Tonight's on-topic program is the first of what we hope will be a series of conversations between our president and experts on issues vital to all of us. Beginning the conversation this evening is President Ken Starr. Judge Starr, a native Texan, became Baylor's 14th president on June 1st, 2010. Joining Judge Starr is Mr. T. Boone Pickens, chairman of BP Capital Management. Mr. Pickens is a native of Oklahoma and a graduate of our Big 12 sister institution, Oklahoma State University. Judge Starr had originally extended an invitation to OSU President Burns Hargis to introduce our speaker tonight. President Hargis was disappointed that a previous commitment prevented his being with us, but in a letter he indicated that it will be a delightful evening because Boone is always entertaining and informative. In addition to being a visionary business leader, Mr. Pickens sets the standard for leadership in philanthropy. He has been generous in his support of his alma mater, hurricane relief along the Gulf Coast, medical research, and community programs for at-risk youth. In recent years, he may be best known for his public advocacy on behalf of alternative energy. His proposal, called the Pickens Plan, is an effort to reduce our dependence on OPEC oil supplies and has been featured widely in newspapers, television, as well as on YouTube and Facebook. You can even follow the progress of the Pickens Plan on Twitter. Please help me in welcoming Mr. T. Boone Pickens to our campus.
Hey, Ken.
Thank you. I go for it. Welcome, Boone. We're delighted that you're here.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. At 82, it's fun to be anywhere, but Baylor's a great place to be. And let me tell you that this morning I got up, I went to bed last night at 8 o'clock, and it was last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I got up this morning, I said, oh my gosh. I said, I wonder if they're going to call off our deal at Baylor after this loss that you took. I thought it could be. They just put it off a day or something, get over it or whatever. But you mentioned Burns Hargis, who's our president, and I thought you said you invited him to come down.
We did. We sure did.
Let me tell you, asking Burns Hargis to come to hear Boone Pickens speak again would be a lot like asking a postman to go walking. He'd had enough.
Well, Burns has been very special to us, especially through this whole Big 12 issue, the future of the Big 12. Burns is a great man, as you know, and he's very proud of you. Would you all join me again in saying to Boone Pickens, welcome to Baylor University.
Thank you.
From Holdenville, Oklahoma, where in his autobiography that's pretty simply named, Boone recounts that at the age of 12, he took over a newspaper route and he expanded it from 25 homes or 28 homes to about 125 homes. So you can use your multiplication tables and say he dramatically expanded his empire. And as he writes in his book, I was making more money than I could imagine at the age of 12. Well, he ended up making a little bit more than on that paper route. And I love, Boone, the way you described where you grew up, where the pavement ends, where the West begins, and the Rock Island crosses the Frisco.
That's right.
From the heartland. Boone Pickens, a crusader, a pioneer, a philanthropist. Years ago, he took on famously big oil. He talked about shareholder rights and who owns corporations. He built a great company. And now, through the Pickens Plan, which he has been talking about around the country, from its rollout in July of 2008, He's been spreading the word, including on college campuses. We're so honored that you're here at Baylor. He was at Yale last week. You saw in the video, he gets around to different college campuses from time to time. And we'll be talking about a number of things, and we'll look forward to your questions toward the conclusion of the conversation. But he's been talking about the Pickens plan, and almost all of America that tunes in knows that there is a Pickens plan. What I'd like to start the conversation out with, Boone, is just tell us about your vision underlying the plan, your concern about reliance on OPEC oil, and then the need for greater energy independence here in the United States.
Ken, I think it all started when I kept hearing candidates for the presidency over the years say, elect me and we'll be energy independent. And it started with Richard Nixon in 1970. And he said by the end of the decade, we will not import any oil. That was in 1970, so he meant at the end of the 70s. At the point he said it, we imported 24%. And I thought, I wonder how he's going to do this, because we were importing more oil all the time. So at the end of the decade, we were importing 28%. And he told us we would not be importing any oil. But never did anybody in the press, media, ever say, you told us, and you didn't do anything at all. But nobody asked that. And I then became so focused and preoccupied with every one of these guys, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, would get up and say sometime in their speech that, elect me and we'll be energy independent. And so we went through one right after the other. If you go on Jon Stewart's web, did you see that one?
No.
That he took, after I was on his show, he then went back and researched it, and every president said, starting with Nixon going forward, every one of them basically said that they'd fix our imported oil. And not one of them did anything. So from that 24% in 1970, we're now up to 67% imports. And this president, he said, when he got the nomination in Denver, he said, in 10 years, we will not import any oil from the Mideast. Now we've gone 3 years almost into his administration. And what do we have? That today we heard the first plan. 3 years later, we now are starting to get the first plan. And he wants very much to use a battery. And battery listen, anything American, I'm for. So that clears up a lot for somebody listening. Say, well, that wiped out probably my first question for him if he's all American, and I am. My issue is get off the OPEC oil. Jim Woolsey, if you remember, was director of CIA, and Jim Woolsey wrote a great op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, April 9th, 2010. And Jim said there that there's no question that a lot of the money paid for oil from OPEC gets in the hands of the Taliban. And that's not hard to figure out either. I mean, anybody sat and looked at it. So now, if we have a way out of the problem, and we do have, that we are starting to look like we're not very smart to continue to pay. We're buying 5 million barrels of oil a day from OPEC. We import 13 million, and we produce 7. And so we're producing a third of our oil, importing 2/3 of the oil, and 40% of that we import comes from the enemy. I think the enemy, because money gets in the hands of the Taliban. So it became a security issue for me, and I got tired of hearing every one of these guys that ran for president tell me we're going to be energy independent. We got them. They never one had a plan. I guess that in those speeches, somebody said, we ought to put something in here about energy. Just say, well, I really believe that's what happened, Ken. I don't think anybody said, we're going to put this in because we have a plan and we're going to tell the people about the plan at some point. They just, I think a staffer or whoever wrote speeches just said, it's time to put that in.
Well, they may have read that you said a fool with a plan is better than a genius with no plan.
You know where that came from?
Where'd that come from?
Well, when I transferred, I went 1 year to Texas A&M, and they cut me off my basketball scholarship, and I went to Oklahoma State then. That was turned out to be a bad break for the Aggies.
Yeah, I think we can hear more applause than that. Especially after last night.
But
right now, do we love Oklahoma State? Do we love the Cowboys?
And so I then went to Oklahoma State, and but there they didn't have fraternities at Texas A&M at that time. My dad was, SAEs, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, was big in my dad's life. Hey, Phi Alpha, brother.
I was going to say order in the house, but
anyway,
we're going to have some fun.
Went up, pledged the fraternity, and now I'm going to be initiated. I'm going to go back and tell you where that came from.
Yeah.
And so my dad came and pinned me with his badge. He was Tennessee Lambda. And so he pinned me, and it was really a nice ceremony. I mean, now my dad was my brother. And so we hugged, and everybody took pictures, shook hands, and all of that. I was now pinned with his badge in 1922, and this is 1948. And 49. And so we walked out on the front lawn, and everything changed from, lighthearted. Everybody was kind of patting everybody on the back and everything else. And we walked out, and we were very much alone, and he was going to his car to leave. And he turned and he said, son, I have something very serious to talk to you about it. And then he brought my mother in, which that was serious, because he said, your mother and I. And when he said that, well, I knew, whoops, it's gonna, because my mother was a disciplinarian in the family, and so she had sent the message to Garcia by him. So he said, we don't think you're on the same schedule to graduate that we're on. And, he said, you went to Texas A&M and you were in veterinary medicine. Then you transferred up here at Oklahoma State, and now you're in the business school. And he said, our schedule is that you'll get out in June of '51. And I thought, ooh, that's doable with a BA. And he then threw in, but you get in engineering or geology and get out of school. And I thought, well, he's serious about this. And he said, son, let me tell you, he said, a fool with a plan can beat a genius with no plan. Your mother and I have concerns that we have a fool with no plan.
You remembered that?
You bet I remembered it, because I knew it was in stone now. I mean, he had done it. And so the next week I got a transcript and went over to geology and saw Brown Monette, who was the dean. Later, that geology school is named for me there. There's several things on that campus that are named for me. But, you can do all those with money.
Well, it's not surprising. We're going to talk about Boone's philanthropy, which is just extraordinary. In fact, let me go ahead and mention it now. Boone, you were asked to take a pledge. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were running around the country asking very successful entrepreneurs, business folk to take a pledge. You going to tell us about that and then how you responded?
Yeah, Bill called me and said, Warren and I are doing I can't even remember what they call that. It's a giving something. I can't remember what they call the club, but said it's 50% of your net worth will go to charity when you die. And I said, well, Bill, if you look in Fortune, October 1984, I said there I'd leave 90% to charity. And he said, well, we're not interested in that. We're only interested in 50%. So I said, well, sign me up. I'll do that.
Well, it has been remarkable. The generosity of Boone is the stuff of legend. And if you've been to the campus at Oklahoma State University, you'll see that not only he's famously given to athletics, but he's also given to academics. And I think there's a very strong lesson there. But one of the things that Boone has said, I firmly believe one of the reasons I was put on this earth was to make money and to be generous with it, and that's what I've continuously tried to do. We were just in Dallas for the game, which didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, and a lot of us expected it to. But several times we drove by the YMCA, and I've worked out in that YMCA, in that downtown YMCA, and it's the T. Boone Pickens YMCA. One of your passions is fitness, and why don't we talk about that? So you were pretty early on into this need for America to be fit, and then we'll come back to the Pickens plan.
Yeah, I founded Mesa Petroleum in 1956, and it was a real company. I mean, we found oil around the world, and we were very successful. But I was into fitness early, and we had a fitness center. The company did, and it cost $2 million, I remember, and a couple of our directors thought it was too much. We had 4 indoor racquetball courts, indoor running track, a basketball court with the track around the deal, and it was in a great weight room. And we showed them 3 years. We saved it on medical costs. We had comparisons to our peer companies, and we more than covered it in 3 years. That we were self-insured, and if you were off work, well, we had less off time, sickness off time than anybody did. We weren't even 50% of anybody else. So we knew we were getting great results, and so we were picked as the most physically fit company in America. But that came after a contest 2 years at Houstonian in Houston. But no, we were pretty good. This morning, I came in yesterday from Barbados, and I did go to bed early last night. But I have a trainer that comes in at 6:30 in the morning, and he's to be there regardless of what time I get in at night. And I said, if I'm not in there to work out at 7 o'clock, I said, you can leave. But I said, don't leave before 7. And I have missed one of those in 17 years with him that I drag in there, and whether I feel like it or not. But having that person there somehow makes me move every day. Today, this morning was legs, and I did 20 squats on the ball with 20 squats, and I did 5 sets, 20 squats on there with a 65-pound vest on. And
I think that's a round of applause.
Hey. But never had a knee injury playing sports or anything, so that was lucky. And so consequently, they checked my knees, and they said, you got enough cartilage to last to the finish line. And so I'm lucky. I'm very lucky, but I've worked on it.
But you've taken care of yourself.
I have, and I'm serious about it, but I'm not a nut about it. I mean, I'm not I don't think I am. Maybe people do think I am.
Well, by the way, the Baylor Business Network had a wonderful program both here at the Waco campus last evening, but also yesterday in Dallas, and the speaker was Ken Blanchard, and I remember Ken starting out his comments by saying, I just celebrated the 50th anniversary of my 21st birthday.
So
you have celebrated how many anniversaries of your 21st birthday?
How many anniversaries of my 21st? I'm 82.
So there it is, 82 years old. I think that's a round of applause. So.
Thanks. Thanks.
Let's talk about the Pickens plan.
Okay.
What are the key elements of the Pickens plan? The problem is OPEC oil.
Yeah, the problem is easy to see, but maybe not everybody agrees, but nobody gets up and says, I don't like your plan. They don't do it because it's either it's an up or down vote, because if you don't like my plan, there's not another plan.
There is a plan in town.
But 70% of all oil used every day goes to transportation fuel. So if you're going to reduce foreign oil, you have to go to transportation. And we only have one resource other than our oil. We produce 7 million barrels a day. The world produces 88 million. We use 21 out of the 88, and that's almost 25% and only 4% of the population. Well, that's not sustainable. I don't think we can get away with that indefinitely, because 88's all the world can produce. In the fourth quarter of this year, demand's 90. So if supply is capped, demand's above supply, you've got to kill demand with price. So we're all going to see $120 oil sometime this year. And then...
You heard it here.
Yeah, and
so get ready. And that translates at the pump to...
Oh, you'd be over $4.
Over $4.
Yeah, it'd be $4.25.
$4.25.
Yeah, a gallon. And so...
And of course, I think you're talking about here in Texas as opposed to California or New York, where because of taxes...
You already have over $4 in California.
Yeah.
And diesel's even higher. Diesel's...
And so what's the answer, Boone? Where should we go?
You have to replace the foreign oil with your own resources. I'm all American, so any way it goes, if it's American, it's for me. Somebody said, you're even for ethanol? It's an ugly baby, but it's our baby. And so I'd rather have ethanol than I would OPEC. So we've got to do it, and so you target and go after the heavy-duty trucks because they use the most fuel. A 18-wheeler, and there are 8 million of them in the United States, use between 20 and 30,000 gallons a year. Now that's J.B. Hunt, Swift, Knight, Walmart, the rest of them, they'll all use about the same. And so we could go in, and the legislation that you'll see next week, it'll be filed next week. It'll be called the Natural Gas Act, and that's what the President spoke to in his speech today. He mentioned the Natural Gas Act. And that is where we have to go first. And we could, over a period of 7 years, we could take out all the 18-wheelers from diesel to natural gas. Now, everything I do has a model, Ken, because I don't believe in R&D. And I know at universities, if you don't believe in R&D, you're not very popular. And so research is important in a lot of things, but R to me is 10 years. D is 10 years. That kind of takes me out of it. That gets me up to 102. So but I go with a model. And here, California is the state that has the most experience with natural gas transportation fuel. The reason, because they had an air quality issue. And you may not be old enough to remember smog in Los Angeles.
Very much, vividly.
But you called before you went to Los Angeles to see what your smog condition were, because you could go in there and you couldn't cut it with a knife. That was cleaned up really by going to natural gas on the buses. Was a big part of it. They had the biggest bus fleet on natural gas in the United States, LAMTA, 2,800 buses. The largest bus fleet in the world is Beijing Transit, 5,600 buses. I visited that in 2007 before the Olympics the next year. They had a lot of smog there. The way they fixed it, though, you know what?
It shut down the plants.
It shut down your car, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you rode the buses.
Couldn't drive it.
Yeah, everybody went to the mass transit to clean it up.
Right.
Well, here, we're trying to use natural gas to beat OPEC, and we're getting a side benefit, which is it's 30% cleaner than diesel. So here we have a fuel that's cleaner, cheaper, abundant, and ours. And I want to replace dirty foreign oil. Should be a cinch, shouldn't it?
Sounds pretty simple.
Yeah, it does.
Is it simple?
It's that simple. But go after the big stuff first, and then to see how many people want to go ahead and use the natural
Let me
gas.
quote from the president's speech today. And by the way, I think it's pretty unusual for the President of the United States to give a major policy speech and do a shout out, so to speak, to a private citizen. It doesn't happen every day. It very rarely
Made me very
happens.
happy.
I bet it did. And so let me quote from the president's speech this morning. I'm asking my Energy Secretary, Stephen Chu, to work with other agencies, the natural gas industry, and environmental experts to improve the safety of this process, and that's making natural gas this application. I don't know if you've heard, but he's talking about Secretary Chu. He's got a Nobel Prize for Physics, and he talks about the Secretary. It's an area of broad bipartisan agreement. Last year, more than 150 members of Congress from both sides of the aisle proposed legislation providing incentives to use clean-burning natural gas in our vehicles instead of oil. They were even joined by Boone Pickens, a businessman who made his fortune on oil, so I asked them to keep at it and pass a bill that helps us achieve this goal. I would say, in fairness, with all respect to the President, the Congressman joined you. Think that's fair and accurate?
I like it better.
But it happens to be true.
It's true. I did go to Congress. I spent a lot of time and all, and I got 155 co-sponsors to the H.R. 1835 bill, which never was voted on last year. But we had 155. The co-sponsors were split, Democrats and Republicans. They were 5 different. I can't even remember who was the most. But it's a nonpartisan issue. It's a beautiful bill. The president needs a nonpartisan issue, a major nonpartisan issue, and for it to pass easily, it will. You'll have over 300 votes on the first vote in the House on it, but it'll pass on the first vote.
Who is opposing or who will oppose the legislation?
Nobody, because the response to it is you don't like it, what's your plan? If they have no plan, then their plan is foreign oil.
And then you can
And
quote
nobody
Mom.
wants to be tagged with foreign oil.
Yeah. And you can quote Mom and Dad if you don't have a plan.
Yeah, a fool with a plan. That's,
Why, you must have a view on this, you've known all the presidents. Why haven't the presidents been willing to really tackle this issue, especially after, Republicans and Democrats alike have said that they would and then they don't?
well, the ones that have told me they would, I go back to the first time I had access on energy was to President Reagan. And it was he was elected 80 and 84. It was in 85, and the Dean McGee called me, and Dean, great guy, great geologist, and he was founder of Kerr McGee. And Dean and I both being geologists, but he was quite a bit older than I was. And Dean and I had been partners in an oil field that we found in the North Sea. So we knew each other pretty well. And I'd worked for Phillips. Dean had worked for Phillips a long time before I had. And we just had some things in common. We were both from Oklahoma. And his wife was a geologist too. And so Dean and I had talked about a lot of things. And, and the foreign oil issue was something that we always talked about and wondered when we were going to do something about it. And then he called me one day and he said that he had talked to the president. The president wanted that for Dean, and I was obviously junior to Dean, but to bring Boone in with you and you all give me some advice and help on an energy plan for America. And so I went over to Oklahoma City. Dean and I talked, and we came up with an idea or two, and I said, who are we going to present this to? And he said, we're going to present it to Holmes Tuttle. And Holmes Tuttle was very close to President Reagan. And Holmes Tuttle was also from Oklahoma. He was from a unique town in Oklahoma.
What was that?
Tuttle, Oklahoma. Do you think Holmes had influence?
Yeah.
But anyway.
But he went to Los Angeles and had a great career.
Holmes Tuttle?
Holmes Tuttle.
Sure.
Yeah.
He was in the kitchen cabinet and very close to the president. But we talked to Holmes, and but that was my first introduction to a president on energy. And then the next chance I got at it was Bush 41, and then Bush 43, but never got very far with anything because George W. was his advisor, main advisor was Dick Cheney, and Dick Cheney was who he went to for help was Halliburton and Exxon, and to me would be probably the last two companies I would go to for advice on domestic energy policy because they're both international companies, good companies, well run, and do a good job for their shareholders, but Exxon, 84% of their revenues come from offshore, and to ask them about domestic energy, somehow I would be concerned that their heart may not be in it. And so my advice to George W. was never considered, I don't think. But this time I had an opportunity to talk to Senator Obama in August of '08 when he was in a campaign. He asked me to come to Reno and talk to him about energy. And they gave me 20 minutes, and this is the way they said it. Said he wants to understand energy, and you have 20 minutes to. I said, I don't think we should start. And then we got in the meeting, and we had gone for about an hour, and his aide had come in twice to tell him he'd run out of time, and it was just the two of us there, and and so the second time he came, he said, Senator said, time is up and we've got, and I said that you think we better stop. I said that we may be at a place here that we're getting ready to get into something that's pretty complicated. And he said, no, I want to hear a bit of it. I want to hear it. And he sent the guy out and he didn't come back again. So we were there an hour and a half, and then I've never had a conversation with him since, but I've been to the White House 4 times since then to discuss this subject, and spent a lot of time with David Axelrod, but it had a kind of a funny part to it before we stopped. Well, he said, "Do I say anything about energy that makes you uncomfortable?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, you say one thing, it makes me laugh." Ooh, I mean, now he's not president yet, and he got a little bent out of shape for a senator. And but he said, "Let me tell you something, Mr. Pickens. When I say something, I mean it. And when I say I'm going to do something, you can count on it." And I said, "Fine." I said, "You want to know what you say? It makes me laugh." And he said, "Yes." I said, "When you tell everybody that you're going to have 1 million plug-in hybrids in 10 years," and he said, "I mean that. I intend to do it." And I said, "Well, let me tell you, if you looked out the window of this hotel here in Reno, Nevada, and there were 1 million cars on that parking lot, it looked like a hell of a bunch of cars, wouldn't it?" He said, "It would be a lot of cars." I said, "Now step back, you're president of the United States. There are 270 million vehicles in America, and you're going to have 1 million of them on plug-in hybrid in 10 years? And he had to laugh then. He kind of smiled. He says, "Not very many, is it?" I said, "No, it's not very many."
So that's not the answer.
That's not the answer. But it was a little bit heartbreaking to me that a month ago he mentioned again he was going to have 1 million plug-in hybrids. And I thought, I'm going to email him and say, "Did you forget about that deal in Reno?"
And looking out the window in Reno.
that isn't very many cars. But he met my wife in a receiving line in Las Vegas. I wasn't with her, and they introduced my wife to him and said, "This is Boone Pickens' wife," and this was before he was elected. Back
Still in the campaign.
Yeah, and he said, "I want to tell you how much I appreciate your husband's commitment to solving an energy problem for America." Said he was very, very impressive when he pulled out his Sharpie and wrote all over the tablecloth. And it makes me sick that I left there with Didn't take that.
Didn't take that
Didn't take the
tablecloth with you.
tablecloth.
You
I
could do
did-
something with that on eBay.
I did that one time in 21 Club in New York, and the guy wanted me to sign the tablecloth and date it, and he signed it too, folded it up, and he wanted it for I don't know what, hang on the wall, I guess. But he did tell me later. He said that when you do that, you ought to save those, because he said if it comes to pass, the Pickens plan, and I had written a Pickens plan right there, and then I went through different steps on it. He said that could be interesting to own someday. And so I don't ever leave them anymore. I give the restaurant $200 for the tablecloth.
Do you mind writing on one of these? And the Pickens plan, by the way, is available online, and a whole lot of folks have signed up. We're going to have questions momentarily, and there may be some questions, and maybe there's skepticism. I mean, this is a university where we ask tough questions. Let me ask about one dimension which you've kind of put on the back burner, and that's wind and wind power and the Great Plains and the great potential power in light of that huge sweep, that vast expanse of land, the Great Plains, running the Pampa project. What's the future of wind as an alternative source of energy?
Well, the future for our country is we've got to use everything. I mean, there's no question that we're going to use it all. And so wind and solar are renewables, and natural gas and oil are, of course, hydrocarbons, but natural gas is an alternative to gasoline and diesel. So wind and solar are kind of off by themselves a little bit. And the reason is when you look at the cost per kilowatt hour, the most expensive that you'll build out will be solar, $6,300 a kilowatt hour. Second is nuclear at $5,300. And then coal has gotten so expensive because of cleaning it and all, it's $5,000 a kilowatt hour. And then comes wind at $2,400, and then comes natural gas at $1,500. So the cleanest is the cheapest, most unusual to be the case for natural gas. So wind is financed off of the cheapest, which is natural gas. So the margin for power generation is natural gas. So natural gas has to be $6 an MCF, and it's $4.50. So it's well under where it has to be for you to finance a wind project. So wind has just collapsed as far as new projects are concerned. When it gets back up to $6,
It'll come back.
Sure. And
It's just market forces right now.
that's all it is. And that's the way it's always been. And the reason why we're so addicted to oil is because oil has been cheap for us. And so every time you try to go to alternatives, the price of oil will drop back. And everybody says, gosh, OPEC, do they do that to stop alternative energy projects in the United States? They do it, they have a tendency after it spikes, comes back, and then go ahead and just kind of wipe out everything that was on the drawing board. Now, my wife, you know Madeline,
right,
and she was born in Kirkuk, Iraq. Her father worked for Iraqi Petroleum. He's English, and her mother's Lebanese. And Madeline she is an immigrant to the United States on a UK passport to here. She is most. We're all patriots, but she really cannot stand for anybody to criticize the United States. She just can't believe you're so lucky to be here and you're complaining. And so she has a lot to say when people start talking about our country. But she still has Mideast friends. And when we were at the Democrat convention in 2008, and I might say that's the only Democrat convention I've ever been to, but I was selling.
Did you have a good time?
I'm selling.
Did you have a good time?
Yeah, listen, I went non-political. I was selling energy,
the energy,
and so I was busy. I had a good time, and everybody treated me nice and all. And but we were there, and she got a call from a Saudi friend of hers, and wanted us to go to dinner with the ambassador to the United States from Saudi Arabia. And so we were just about to leave when they called. We'd already packed. And she put her hand over you and said, my friend wants us to go to dinner with the Saudi ambassador. And I said, oh, that'll be a big bunch of people. And so, but I said, no, let's go. And so we unpacked, spent the night. We went, and there were only 5 of us there. The Saudi ambassador, his wife, the friend that brought us together, and Madeline and me. And we hadn't talked 3 minutes until the Saudi ambassador said to me, he said, what is your Pickens plan? What do you plan on doing? And I had just announced that 2 weeks before. I announced it on July the 8th, and I think this was about the 21st or something.
Yeah, this July 2008.
Yeah, and they had already looked at what I'd said. And I said, well, you know, if you say something with a smile and all, you get away with practically anything. I said, what I want to do is get off your oil. And he said, why would you want to do that? We're friends. Our countries are friends. I don't know. I've been around so long. When I think of the Saudis, I know there were 18 of them on those 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So I somehow don't chalk them up as friendly to us. And so we talked, had a very nice evening, and he wanted me to come to Saudi Arabia and build a wind farm. And so I felt it was an early offer of greenmail, is what I saw. And when we left the meeting, the friend of Madeline's, he walked the car with us, and he said, I don't think you understand. He said, he's very serious about you coming to Saudi Arabia. And I said, I'm not coming there and build a wind farm. And he said, they will finance it and all. It'll be very, very good. But you'll
Make a lot of money.
Make a lot of money. And I said, I have a mission here to get this fixed. And that's what I intend to do. So then they contacted me 2 more times, but always through her. They would approach through her, and they couldn't be nicer. I mean, they're nice people to talk to, but I'm not interested in the deal. But I know what we're doing is right, and I know that we're getting the right vibes from the other people because they don't like what we're doing. Not liking what we're doing makes me like it better. So,
you know, courage is an important dimension of leadership, and Boone talks in his commentaries about leadership, what makes good leaders. You mentioned President Reagan. One of the quotes that I very much wanted to bring to the audience's attention. And let's talk about leadership just for a minute or two.
Talk about what?
About leadership.
Yeah.
President Reagan was one of the finest leaders of this century. Business leaders and entrepreneurs alike can learn from his management style and communication practices. And I should say, by the way, we're very proud of our School of Entrepreneurship here, which is ranked number 2 in the country. It's a very entrepreneurial atmosphere and culture here at Baylor. Ronald Reagan always left an audience with the impression that he was sincere, approachable, and a regular guy. These qualities are described in Reagan on Leadership in a way that is invaluable for today's executives. It should be required reading in business schools across America. So you think he is a good example of leadership, obviously, and why is that?
He was decisive, for one. He could make up his mind, and I don't think he ever paid any attention to any polls. I didn't think that happened in his administration. I thought it happened soon after his administration, where polls were very, very important to decision making in the White House, which I think you should be above that, and you know, manage what was best for the country and not whether you're going to be reelected or somebody else was. But one thing I did say about President Reagan, that I said that anybody that watched him knew he was a sincere man, he was a serious man, and that when they watched him, even if they weren't for him, they would say, I believe he knows what he's talking about or thinks he does. But I don't quite agree with him on some points. And I think he's the kind of person that I could approach him and change his mind. Forget it. Changing his mind, forget it. I mean, I tried that once. And he's very, very polite, kind, considerate man. But he had his mind made up, and he knew what he wanted. He stuck with it, and look what he accomplished. I mean, is every decision perfect? Of course not. If you're making decisions, you're going to miss one every once in a while. But I'm telling you, he was 90%, and that'll win anything. And
well, one of your criticisms of corporate America, a very large corporate management, was that there was a tendency to ready, aim, 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 and not be willing to fire.
that was in that first book. But there are a lot of guys that can't pull the trigger. I mean, they can always figure out something, some reason why we can't do it, and they just keep calling for another, report, call for another investigation, call for another paper on the subject. It comes time once you've analyzed it. It's really you let the people in the company that are counting on you. You've got to once they've analyzed it for you and they've covered the subject, it's time to make a decision. You can't just keep putting it off.
Yeah. Be decisive. Analyze.
I've never struggled with that.
Yeah, he can go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night. Before we open to the audience, I just want to share a few Booneisms on leadership. Learn to analyze well, assess risks and prospective awards. There is no substitute for good research. Be a team player. Be patient. Don't forget the old adage, patience is a great virtue. Be realistic. Dream, yes, but don't be a daydreamer. That's really good. Concentrate on the goals, not on the size of the organization. You can't measure a place by size unless it's a football stadium. Boone's built a really nice one in Stillwater. And this is one that I wanted, if you would, to comment on, because it's very near and dear to the hearts of anyone in a university community, but especially our students. This is a Booneism. Forget about age, which means giving young people a chance. Why did you come to that view?
Well, if you look at the ages of the people that even are with me now, but this was 30 years ago at Mesa, and so 30 years ago would have taken me back to 52, so it must have been 20 years ago, 62. I used to say the average age at Mesa is 36 years old, and but I always bet on young people. And that sort of kind of one time, 1984, I thought it was time to change the guard, and I had 4 guys that I thought were ready to go. I thought they'd lost their enthusiasm, and that was a tough day. But I made a deal with all of them and moved them out, moved in younger people. But I had somebody ask me one time, said that, how do you feel about blacks as geologists and geophysicists? And I said, I've never met but one geophysicist that was black with Amoco. They said, you think he was good? I said, he was good as there was in the room. I didn't think he was the best, and I didn't think he was the worst. They were all good geophysicists. They said, would you hire him? I said, look, I don't care whether they're black, white, or striped. If they can find oil, they can work for Boone Pickens.
And now natural gas. Although you know where the natural gas is.
And women raised me, my mother, aunt, and grandmother. My dad was there, but the influence came because they were there all the time. Mm-hmm. And they were always together, and they were always against me.
You were outnumbered.
I was outnumbered continually. So but I don't have any problems with. But when people run out of gas with me, they need to go to the sidelines. I want to get them off the field. And you say, well, gosh, do you look at yourself? I do every morning. I have to shave. I know who I'm shaving. and does it concern me? When I lose my enthusiasm, I'll find something else to do. But I tell you, every day is I look forward to the day. I do. And it's I've been married, 4 times. I was married 22 years and 4 children, 24 years and 1 child, 4 years, no children, and I've been married 6 years to my 4th wife. And I really think I could sum up those marriages that didn't work is it was kind of like my 4th wife said before we got married. I said, I love to work. And I said, I work a lot and all. And she had lost her husband, Alan Paulson. She said, Alan loved to work too. And after we'd been married for 6 months, she said, you love to work more than anybody I've ever seen. I think I wear them out. That's what I did. Because we went to Barbados out of Miami on Sunday afternoon. And we were back in Houston. I made a speech in Houston yesterday noon. So we were gone down to Barbados, but we went down there to meet some people from Ireland that I felt like we could do business with. And so I was back, and somebody said, how did you like Barbados? I said, it was fine. I wasn't there but a minute. But it's the first time I'd ever been there.
Is this inspiring at the age of 82? That's great. Boone, we're going to open it up now, and our provost is going to come forward, and we're going to, I think, bring some house lights up and have questions now from the audience. Would you join me in saying thank you to our provost for moderating?
We have microphones in each of the 2 center aisles, so we'd ask you to come forward and present your questions based on the topics you've heard this evening. We'll start right here.
I received a brochure in the mail that said 59% of the federal budget goes to the military. And is there something in your plan that helps the military reduce their dependency on foreign oil? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm very much against having troops in the Mideast. And I've asked, and I'm very close to the military, and it breaks my heart to see people killed there every day. And I'm not sure that when we get through that we can explain what they were doing there. And I can't imagine losing people and not have a reason for it happening. And so I ask them, I say, why do they tell you you're in Afghanistan? And this Marine captain told me, he said, Mr. Pickens, I don't question that I'm doing the right thing. And I said, no, I'm not asking you to question. I'm just asking you what they tell you you're doing there. And he said, well, they said, the first thing we want you to do is go to Afghanistan, and part of your mission is make friends. I said, they told you to go to Afghanistan and make friends. I said, I think I'd send the Chamber of Commerce for the chore, not to send somebody out with an AK-47 on their back and make friends. I don't think we went to Iraq for the oil, and I don't think we went to Afghanistan for the rocks. But I don't think we had to be there. And I think we have another war where people are lost, and we really have not much to show for it. If we were on our own resources, I promise you we would not have people in the Mideast doing what they're doing. And, when you go back to the wars, that Korea was the first war the politicians ran. And we still have 28,000 people in Korea. Why? Why do we have 50,000 people in Japan? Why do we have 100,000 people in Germany? I don't get it. I don't understand why we don't leave them alone. why are we the ones that always go in? And now it's the hardest thing in the world to explain what we aren't doing in Libya, not what we are doing. But we now have the French, and we're going to head up that campaign. But that didn't work, so now we switched over to NATO. I don't think they know, I don't get it. But I can tell you, we're in there, and can you imagine, we went to Iraq and lost 5,000 people, 31,000 injured, and we spent $1.5 trillion. And guess who got the oil in Iraq? They've now divvied it up, given it out, and they want their oil developed. They had gotten down to 2 million barrels a day. They want to bring it up to 5 million barrels a day. And guess who is the biggest player in the Iraqi oil? China. China. Not us. And I talked to the White House twice with Bush and once with Obama. I said, please do not leave there without our getting a call on the oil. And I said, I think you can get the Iraqis to ask us if we want a call. We don't have to ask them for what we've done for them. And President Bush said, what would you pay for the oil? I said, you pay the market price. Just get a call on the oil. So that's a security for America. And the Chinese ended up the biggest owners of Iraqi oil. To me, that is, after you count the people we lost, that is the biggest mistake we made in Iraq. The Chinese have the oil.
Thank you.
Very
How about
sober.
Thank you.
over here?
I've got a couple of questions for you. First one is, could I have a job?
Might need a resume.
I've got one.
Send it to him.
All right. My real question is, your plan seems so simple and so smart, and I'm wondering, in your opinion, what will be the biggest difficulty in implementing it?
I think it's going to pass. I said it will be law by the end of this year, and I think that's about as fast track as you can put something through Congress. So, and once it's passed, let me tell you, I'll bet on the truckers. I met with the truckers Saturday before the Super Bowl. Jimmy Haslam, who has Pilot Flying J truck stops, he called me and he said, could you meet with the 20 biggest truckers on Saturday morning before the Super Bowl on Sunday? He said, it'll be early. I said, fine, let's do it at 3:30. And he said, 3:30? I said, you said you wanted it early. I said, you don't realize how important the truckers are to what I'm trying to accomplish. So I said, I'll see them as early as they want to meet. And he said, well, 7:30 is the time. I said, okay, I'll be there. But I went to Fort Worth, met with them. And I said, let me tell you something, fellas. I'm on a mission. And I said, the first people I'd call for help would be the Marines. But this isn't a military mission. The second guys I'd talk to would be you guys, the truckers. I said, you look a lot like Marines to me. I said, if you're convinced something has to be done, I think you would help out on it. This has to be done. And I went through it, and Kevin Knight Trucking, he said, don't make us pay to be patriotic. And I said, you won't have to pay. It'll be $60,000 tax credit on the bill. He said, give us 5 years to work it off. I said, I'll see what I can do. The next week, I got that in the bill. And the truckers are ready to go. I look forward to the day that those trucks go down the highway and on the side of them and say, I'm using domestic natural gas, not OPEC oil. I want that on those trucks. I think there's a better way to phrase it. Maybe what I've said is, but you see what I mean, though. I want it on the trucks. I want to show somebody that we can get off OPEC oil. So anyway, I think it's going to happen as fast as I could hope for now. And sure, I'd like to have done it 2 years ago, but we weren't ready then. But we're ready now. So it's going to happen.
Great. Right here.
First, thank you so much, Mr. Pickens, come and share with us with your plan. My name is Jay Guo, from senior student from Baylor, from our business school. Couple of days ago, Mr. John Lowe from ConocoPhillips gave us a speech talking about the future of energy. And on his data, ConocoPhillips shows that from 2020 to 2028, the natural gas market share actually go down. And meanwhile, from 2020 to 2028, the coal market share is going up. I asked him what's the reason. He said because natural gas do not have enough lobbying in Washington compared to coal. What do you think of that? Do you think that will change from right now to 2020? Because as we all know, natural gas is much cleaner. As far as price goes, it's also relatively cheap.
I don't know. It's interesting. You're gonna lose the battle because they have better lobbyists than you do.
Well,
You said the natural gas was better fuel than coal.
correct.
That's a shame, though, if we're using something less than the best because somebody has better lobbyists.
That's the data from ConocoPhillips, and it shows from 2020 and forward the market share of natural gas.
Oh, I understand
Do
what
you
you-
agree with that, or
No, I don't agree with
You
that.
don't agree
no,
with that?
I don't agree with that.
Great. Okay, over here.
Mr. Pickens, I wanted to say thank you for coming to Baylor, first of all. My question has a lot to do with the current political climate, in that in the U.S. we have somewhat of a debt problem, and over the next several years, personally, I hope to see the GOP and the Democrats work together to resolve issues as far as cost and the United States budget. And recently, the push on the part of the GOP and specifically Tea Partiers has made somewhat of an impact in attempting to reduce spending on the part of the government. My question to you then is, how do you see this impacting your Pickens plan, and what do you think the effect is going to be given if this comes to pass? The general populace might reduce spending on a lot of things.
Well, I don't see that we're going to have to show, the Senate will make us show, pay for the Natural Gas Act. And I will try to sell them on as small amount of pay for as we have to have, but we'll get to whatever we have to accomplish it. But my issue is more of a security issue. And you don't have to have a pay for the Army or Navy because it's security. I think we could come under that same classification. But if we don't, we'll get a pay for from somewhere. This is all going to be done. I'm not kidding you. I have committed my time and my own money to it. I spent $82 million out of my pocket on this plan. And that's all the advertising and everything else I've done. So we're going to get it done because it has to be done for the country. I mean, if we go forward without an energy plan from here, it'll be a disaster. I mean, we can't. That's why I like to speak at a university, because I think I get to enough of the young people to understand, they understand that this responsibility is going to end up being theirs. So they need to understand energy, and after they run across me, then they become focused on it somewhat. But what I tried to get the president to do in the State of the Union message the last 2 years, and I thought it was in this year, was all federal vehicles by executive order purchased in the future would be on domestic fuel. I don't care what it is, just so it's American. But that's only 200,000 vehicles that they purchase every year. That's not going to solve any problem, but it does solve the direction that we're headed, one. And two, it gives you leadership to carry out this mission. Then it would be followed in a few months where the president would come to all of us and said, this has nothing to do with politics, but the next car that you buy, it will be on domestic fuel. I'm asking you to do this. And we want it to be clean, and we want it to be on domestic fuel. That will start a dialogue within the families. I had 5 kids at the dinner table in the 60s, and we actually had questions and studies and responses, and we talked about a lot of things. At that time, my family was living in Calgary, Alberta, and I'll never forget that the kids would come home and couldn't wait for dinner to tell you what they had found about Canada. And that went on for a month or 2. But I've got to tell you, my daughter came and she kept wanting to tell me that she had something that we had to hear. And I said, wait till dinner and you'll be the first one to talk. And so now came time for Pam to talk, and she said, do you realize that we are a minority? And I said, we're a minority. How did you come upon this? She said, this morning when they sang the national anthem, it wasn't
The Star Spangled Banner.
Star Spangled Banner. I drew a blank. It wasn't the Star Spangled Banner. It was Old Canada. And I said, and so we're a minority? She said, yes, we're a minority. Almost everybody there sang it, and I didn't. And it was interesting, though, that, and we all have struggled through minority issues in this country. But here, this would have been a subject at the table for us. I would have signed Deborah ethanol, and one of the other kids plug-in hybrids, and another one would be natural gas, and another would be biofuels and all. And we would have taken probably several weeks, but the family would have come up with a decision, and we would have bought a car, as the president asked us to do, would be on domestic fuel. And from there, my family would be educated. And at that point forward, we would always buy a car on domestic fuel. And they would, with their families and all. That's the missing link in this country right now, is we're not educated on the subject. We do not understand energy. And that's sad to see, but it is the case. But I did have a plan, and so today the president took that step for federal vehicles and encouraged that. But I think, I think the plan is good. But who doesn't like their own plan? So, but I think it'll all happen. So.
Right. About right here.
Mr. Pickens, I don't have as perfect a memory as yours, so I may be wrong on the year, but it was either 2005 or 2006 that we drove west on I-20 and saw that magnificent wind farm and windmill upon windmill, and I was very, very taken by that. And of course, anybody who can harness the wind and figure out what to do with it, I thought was brilliant. And since that time, I've mentioned to several engineers that I'm become aware of about the ability to have wind energy in our electric grid. And they have all cautioned me that that transition costs in the trillions. Now, I'm hoping they're wrong. But how do you anticipate that we will convert wind energy to the electric grid for a reasonable, whatever that may be, amount of money?
Well, it's going to happen, but when they say trillions of dollars, my question would be is how big do you want this to be? How big an area do you want to cover? It's going to come in segments of what will happen, but right now, where you went right through Sweetwater, Texas, and you saw all those turbines that are out there. And so consequently, those are feeding into the transmission lines now. And so when they talk about building out trillions of dollars of transmission, they're talking about going up through the Midwest part of the United States. Actually, if today you sat down, disregarded the cost to start with, made a real study of the United States, we have fabulous wind resources from Sweetwater, Texas to the Canadian border. And the people in that corridor want those turbines because they create money for them, just like oil wells do. It has a wind royalty that it pays. So that can, the biggest owner of wind in the United States is Warren Buffett. But you never see that.
Yeah.
The name of his company is Midcon. But he's a great believer of wind energy. But no, of course, wind does not blow all the time. You can't believe how many people, when I said wind is a resource that we should develop, they said, Boone, you've got to know wind does not blow all the time. I said, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Well, let's forget that idea. No, you can't forget that idea. You're going to use wind and all, but I'm from West Texas. I lived out there 40 years, so it's hard to convince me the wind doesn't blow all the time. But anyway, we're going to use it, but what you've got to do is you've got to think positive about the question. But we've never been tasked in this country to develop our resources for energy. It just hadn't happened because we've always had oil and it's been relatively cheap. But we've never been, once this thing starts, once your leadership steps up and said, look, we're going to use everything here and we're going to get the price down on the wind and on the solar, and we're going to have, we're going to use nuclear. We're going to use all these things. And now let's figure out what the portfolio looks like. Nobody has ever approached it like that. I mean, we've always just gone for whatever was the cheapest, use that. And it's time for us all to understand that this is more than just the cheapest fuel. We're probably going to use that one too, which is natural gas. But you're going to use the others. All of them are going to be used. And if you think you're going to leave coal, you're kidding yourself. I was in a meeting in Washington, and a person that I thought was as smart as I was sitting there, and he said, well, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to cut out all coal-fired power generation in America and replace it with wind. 52% of our power in the United States comes from coal, and he wants to replace it with wind. I mean, I thought, this is a joke. He's trying to see if I'm asleep. Something. And I said, are you really serious? And he said, yes, I don't like coal. And I said, well, I get that, but wind, it doesn't blow all the time. Wind, you couple wind with natural gas. Because natural gas, you can turn it on and off. Coal, you can't. Coal's a base load fuel. And when you are using coal and generating power, you can't move it up and down. It's base load. Then you can add on top of it natural gas or even wind or solar. But coal kind of is by itself in the whole scheme of things. And but that again, that's more information that we're going to have to develop to get into all of the things that are going to have to happen. But I'm telling you that oil globally is right at the peak point. You may be at the point where you're not going to get any more oil. So once that happens, it starts to decline at 7%. So when, like this year's 88 million barrels a day, it declines 7, so you got to look for 6 more. So to get back to 88, you got to find 6 first to put back before you can go above 88. So, I mean, all of you, I know this, but these are finite resources that you're dealing with. The biggest oil field in Saudi Arabia is Ghawar. It was found in 51, went on production in 51. You're talking about 60 years ago. That field peaked at 7 million barrels a day. It now produces 4, but they're lifting 10 million barrels of water a day. That would be identified by engineers, reservoir engineers, as a mature oil field. Mature. That field is in decline and then depletion. And they haven't got another Ghawar in Saudi Arabia. There was only one of those. That's the biggest oil field in the world ever. So, these things are serious, very serious, and we kind of go along and don't pay much attention to them. Then one night some guy comes through town and gets you all down here and beats you up on a thing. Rex Tillerson, that's CEO of Exxon, he always accused me. He said, what you like to do is get 300 people in a room, scare hell out of them. Some of that's true.
Sometimes we need to be scared. Elizabeth?
Okay, thank you. Next person.
Again, thank you, Mr. Perkins, for coming down and speaking with us. I actually have two questions. The first of which, my older brother has always been a Wendell-Berry fan, and so that'll actually relate to the second one. But one of the concerns that he's had, and which I've come to share with him because we have family discussions like you mentioned, is the use of too big of a solution for too small of a problem, if that makes any sense. And I come from the state of Maine, where we, for the past 40 years, pretty much blindly follow anything that California does to do their environmental friendliness thing, and that resulted in our having the required use of MTBE in our gasoline, which then proceeded to poison 20% of our water wells.
That was a bad idea, MTBE.
It was, but we followed it, and my brother ended up developing an allergy to gasoline because of that. And so he's always been interested in alternative fuels. So we drive diesel cars at the moment, which he would like to convert to French fry oil at some point. But he's also always interested in steam
You'd like
cars.
to convert to what?
French fry oil. You heat it up and you can burn pretty much anything in a diesel engine. But his question, when I mentioned that I was coming down here, which I had been thinking about, was what's the environmental and fiscal impact of trashing the 27 million cars we've got and switching them to natural gas? And the second...
Wait a minute, the 27 million. We have 270 million vehicles.
270 million, rather, yes.
Okay. And we're going to trash them?
Well, they're going to end up in the landfill at one point or another. So...
Well, you know, realistically, it's like shutting down all the coal fire. That isn't going to work. I mean, you can't trash all the 270 million vehicles. There's only one passenger car made in America on natural gas. And you are in Paris, France tonight, and you can go down and shop for 40 passenger cars that are on natural gas. And guess what? That a dozen of them are General Motors, and General Motors makes none in the United States. But they make 18 total, I think, and but none in the United States. But there hasn't been a market for it. The one only car is the Honda GX Civic. I have that car, the only one. No, I mean, it's University of Texas, I'm there. And I say this, I said, there's only one car made in the United States that's on natural gas. And I said, Honda GX Civic, and I have that. Some guy in the back of the room said, why are you the only one that has a car? I said, no, they make others. I just have one of them. He was the same guy that said, I said, it's a very, very good commuter car. And I said, I fuel it in my garage at home, and it costs me less than $1 a gallon. I just plug it in, and it fills up overnight. And I said, then I get the HOV lane because I'm on natural gas or electric and with single occupancy. I said, my car has only one weakness. That is, I live less than a mile from my office. And same guy gets up and said, well, why don't you just walk? I said, only at the University of Texas you have these smart, brilliant people. Also rude.
Thank you. Right here.
As a business student, I believe that private investment is one of the main drivers of innovation. How can we promote the innovation not only in the corporate level, but from small businesses and even in private households?
Okay, I think I got it, but you're talking about looking for leadership.
I'm talking about like how can we encourage the investment in these renewable energies and
Renewable or
Yes,
all-
the investment in renewable energy, right?
yes.
Yeah, I want to talk about something else, so I'm going to answer that question. I don't know what you do about renewable. I think then you go back, you've got to have leadership that understands what we're talking about. And if we had a president that in every speech, not every one, but every other one, that he would mention progress in energy and then tell you that he wants to get on renewables and he also wants to get on alternatives, that all of this would help. But what I did on natural gas, I went to AT&T and Verizon, and I said, fellas, I need some leadership on this, and by golly, both of them came through for me. And they came out, and Randall Stevenson, CEO of AT&T, took him 2 weeks, and he had board approval, and he said, we're going to do 10% of all our vehicles to start with on natural gas, and they have 84,000 vehicles. So they bought all new vehicles, and they went up, now they've gone over 10% on natural gas. But we need that kind of leadership, but that takes you back then to the trucks. I get those truckers that come out with me and say they're ready to go. Well, that's leadership that sinks in. A leader may not affect everybody, but all leaders, that they have somebody that's ready to follow. And so, unfortunately, some leaders are not good people, they're evil people. But they can get people to follow them too, as we know. But if I could get, the right leadership on this, that we could go, it would go faster, is the way it would work. But we need to go for all facets of our energy spectrum. So
I know there are other questions, but our time is expiring. And so I want to close and thank you, Elizabeth, our wonderful provost, by saying if you read some of these Booneisms and the stories, and this is, by the way, I think this is your most recent book, The First Billion is the Hardest.
it was.
That's really comforting.
Do you?
And I have found that's true.
But Ken, how old are you?
64.
Gosh, see, I never got a B until I was 70. So, there's worlds of time for you.
There's hope. I need to talk to the Board of Regents. And part of Boone's advice is, and this is Booneism number 30, show up early, work hard, stay late. Then he says, and I like this, work 8 hours and sleep 8 hours, and make sure they are not the same 8 hours. There's just lots of wit and wisdom.
Guys, those are brilliant things, aren't they?
They really are. And he learned all this in Oklahoma and Canada. And so let me close with this note of thanks. In Sunday's Tribune Herald, and we're honored to have Clifton Robinson here, the chairman of Robinson Communications. But Boone wrote a wonderful op-ed piece, and he made a number of points. You can go online and you can get this. Batteries won't push an 18-wheeler. That was part of your point earlier tonight. Neither will ethanol. The only substitute for imported diesel to power our truck fleet is natural gas, of which we have more than a 100-year supply. So if you want to learn more, go to the op-ed page or go online, look at one of Boone's books, and by the way, the royalties from the books all go to charity.
Can I enter in?
Please.
Okay, that something I forgot to say,
Please.
which I always say, but go on my website, pickensplan.com. I've had over 20 million people go on there, and I've had 1,700,000 sign up with me in the Pickens Plan Army. Doesn't cost you a dime. I'll be in touch with you. You're not committed to anything other than you're in the Army. Let me tell you, 30 years ago when I went to Washington and started lobbying for what I thought were good causes, of course, that I couldn't bob a cork, and I didn't get anywhere. Somebody asked me one time, said, how much legislation have you ever gotten passed in your life? I said, nothing. I've stopped some bad stuff, but I've never gotten anything passed. This time, maybe I accomplished that before I'm finished. But when I went on, they can go on my website too. Anybody can. They can see I've got 1,700,000 people. Let me tell you, the attitude's a lot different towards me now. I'm serious. I've got 1,700,000, and they can kind of gross that up and say, you know, there's probably a spouse there. So that's 3, 4, and they probably got a child in the home that votes. This guy's walking around with 5 million votes. Am I? I don't know. I've never asked these people to vote on anything. But I would never, ever say anything to them about one subject. But one subject would be energy. I would never cheapen what I'm doing to ever even mention anything else I might be for or against. But energy, that's the only thing. But the demographics of this are that those 5 million people are in touch with 3 other people each. So now you should see I'm totally different. I went in to see Henry Waxman, California congressman, and we talked for a few minutes, and he said, Boone, is your army with you on this subject? I said, Henry, they're in the parking lot. They're ready to march.
They're ready to
They're
march.
ready to march. But you can see how they can think about this. I mean, people are everything. When you start voting, I don't care how influential you are. If you got a bunch of people, that's more important than anything else.
Welcome to democracy. Join me in thanking T. Boone Pickens.
Thank you. That was good. Fun. We said it'd be fun.
It was fun.
It was fun. Yeah. Thank you.
This is for you.
Thank you.
Specially commissioned, you don't need to open it now, and I'm going to keep it for you, but it was specially commissioned for you. It's a piece thrown by our ceramist in residence, Paul McCoy, and I understand that he was able to find a little orange pigment so that it'll match what you have at home. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.